Welcome back to the Artie Lange Show. Artie is sick. Jim Norton is here hosting, and we have Aries Spears on the show. Welcome.
What's up, man? How you doing, brother?
Great.
I was very happy to hear that you were here tonight. Aries and I go back many, many years.
Yeah.
We're both from New Jersey, and I remember performing in Arbijon's in East Brunswick.
Wow.
And your mom had brought you in.
Yeah, early. That's when I was first starting out, man.
And how old were you at that point?
I started when I was 14. So
Started doing stand-up.
Yeah, so from 14 to 16, she would take me all throughout the clubs in Jersey and some in New York, mostly Jersey, but some in New York before I eventually moved out to LA at 17.
You were funny too, and I remember you got real laughs. And we all knew that you were actually going to turn into a really good actor. I was terrible at that time. I was probably a year ahead of you.
My thing, I grew up, in the 80s, and television raised me. And my favorite show, of course, was SNL during the Eddie years. So, my father, Richard Pryor, was his era. And we had all the records, man. Richard, Red, Carlin. So I knew I didn't want to be that guy to come out and get laughs because I was a kid. That, it's so cute for a kid to be saying what he's saying. I really wanted to kind of push the envelope and try to be respected as a real comic, even at that early of an age.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
So I think we're the same age. Your high school was 93, right?
That whole school era was a blur for me. I quit.
But you're 75.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're like the same grade.
Yeah.
So you're saying, so this is 89 when you started doing stand-up?
Yeah, about that, man.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to what I was doing in 1989, and I was, I was probably like 5'5", 130 pounds.
Well, I clearly sucked at school, and it was like if I was going to try and pretend to go down that route, I'd have been an absolute failure.
Your mom must have been pretty cool though, to be just like, hey, you know what? If this is what you want to do, I'll drive you.
Well, my mother sang, and till this day she still does. She sang jazz and blues. She performed at the White House for Reagan. She used to sing with Lionel Hampton before he passed away. So she's always had a heavy influence in entertainment, man.
Jeez.
Yeah,
it was great to see, man. It was, and you were with me on one of my worst shows ever. It was Bill Bellamy was hosting. And it was a club in East Orange, New Jersey.
The Peppermint Lounge?
It was a Club 88, I think.
Club
it was
88,
called.
okay.
Club 88.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of racial tension because the Rodney King beating had just happened. And I went on, and not a good set. Not a good set.
That's I don't know if they still refer to it as that. I know they did back in the day, but, anytime you did all the black clubs, like the Chitlin circuit. So that between Club 88, Tribeca, Peppermint Lounge, those were all the black rooms. So just to be a white comic performing in that arena, hats off, man.
Well, it wasn't an uncomfortable or like aggressive feeling from the audience. It was just you feel like you were interrupting something, like something great was about to happen, but I was wrecking it by standing there talking. And because Bill had killed, and I remember you went on, and I don't even think you saw me, and you did great after, so I knew it was me.
Oh, hilarious.
There's nothing worse than when you bomb and the other comedians get. You always want the other comics to bomb, then you're like, oh, this crowd sucks. But no, it was me.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
So you're a young kid. I saw that you got booted from your sophomore year for fighting from school.
Probably, dude. I spent so much time in suspension.
What were you fighting about?
Just being wild and ruckus and, just being ridiculous. You know what I mean? My attention span for learning was just none. So, every chance I got, man, I was either trying to do impressions or grab attention or cursing out teachers. And school with me, it wasn't the move.
Yeah.
Would you and your father, because I was on a split for the generation. Like, I'm a Pryor freak, but guys a couple years younger than me were all Eddie Murphy guys.
Right.
So would you and your father kind of like, he was a Richard guy and you were an Eddie guy?
That's why I was saying, like, back before the explosion of Def Comedy Jam, before, black comedians could come in waves, it's like every decade there was only one person allowed to wear the Letterman's jacket at the country club.
Right.
So, it was Red, then it was Richard, then it was Eddie, then Def Jam happened and changed the game. So Eddie was my, even to this day, I mean, we all of course know Richard Pryor's like the Michael Jordan of comedy, but as much as I watch Richard, Eddie was it for me.
He was your guy.
Yeah.
And but it was weird. You'd talk to somebody in the younger generation, or even if it was only like a couple of years, and Murphy would do something and go, but prior to that, it was just it's this weird pride thing where you connect to things that you like, and I don't know what makes us connect to that stuff.
Yeah, I don't mean to venture off the path of wherever we're going, but I envy you, Jim, because you had the pleasure of knowing Patrice O'Neal, which I wish to God I had. I might have bumped into Patrice all of 4 times in my existence, and he always, gave me respect and showed me love. But I didn't know him like you knew him, or like O&A knew him. And it's just, I preach it to the world, man. When people talk about comics, I go, you guys don't understand. If this dude hadn't passed away, he would have been the biggest thing going, because his talent level and his mind was just, to this day, I study him to death. I mean, he's phenomenal, man. Yeah. Phenomenal.
It's funny, Patrice, I had a couple of the biggest laughs in my life with him. And the thing with him as a guy, there's no comic that you couldn't have sat him in a room with that he couldn't have been as funny as.
Oh, no question.
Conversational. And I mean any of them. He was as a man, as a funny dude. Patrice was as funny as anybody who has ever performed stand-up. And I'm not waxing poetic about the dead either. I mean, I really mean that.
Well, I mean, it's like, look, we all want respect from our peers, especially the great ones. Because if someone great validates you, you feel like you're in that world. And like I said, I didn't know Patrice like that. And it wasn't until recently I absolutely forgot that I had been on Opie and Anthony with Patrice talking about the situation I got into with those jerks in Florida at the radio station. And I remember being there with Patrice, but I didn't remember what was said because it was so long ago. So when I recently listened to it on YouTube, some of the back and forth between what he was saying, what I was saying, what O&A was saying, it just, I'm not necessarily trying to say that he was saying, hey, man, I respect you as a comic, or I think you're great. But based on the conversation and what went down, I kind of felt like he at least had that respect for me. And that to me is huge, man. I was always, even towards the later years when I bumped into him, I almost kind of wanted to talk to him and pick his brain. But, he's a little intimidating. And if you didn't know him, and he kind of felt, I don't want to say standoffish, but you didn't know if you were in. So I didn't want to, you know what I'm saying? I wanted to keep my distance.
I'll tell you about one thing about Patrice. If you felt that it kind of went well, it did. Because if there's one thing Patrice couldn't do is hide when he didn't like somebody.
Right.
There was nothing in his makeup that would allow him to hide disdain for somebody.
Right.
He actually enjoyed showing people that he couldn't stand them. And it was a really weird guy. Like, he was one of those guys that, like, to make himself comfortable in uncomfortable situations, he would find the biggest target in the room and take it down. And that was, and at times he said he regretted that because, there's these executives that he's just, kind of humiliating, but he struck it. All comedians loved him because he would go after the guys that we did.
Right. Well, I mean, I think, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but from what I heard and the sense that I got was that it's almost like he shot himself in the foot.
Oh, yeah.
Because there was that stigma that he was either, and I've gone through this. If you're black in Hollywood and you don't smile, you're angry, or you got a chip on your shoulder. And again, sometimes these Hollywood people don't take the time to get to know you. They just want you to be the tap dancer. And I'm not a tap dancer. And I don't walk around cheesing all day. So there's even this perception of me that I'm either angry, a diva, difficult. And it's like none of the above. I just don't walk around cheesing all day. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So, and if there's anything, I guess, to learn from that, I got to figure out how to play this game, man. Because I look at Patrice, and I mean, obviously, his health is what took him out. Yeah. But I often wonder, had that not been the case, that stigma that was around him, how long would that have held him back, if at all? Because he looked like he was on the verge of being major, man.
He was
major.
He was.
I hear about him all the time on this show, and everyone talks about him with such reverence. It's amazing. But we got to take a break. We'll be back.
Can I plug Aries? I'll be in Gotham Comedy Club this weekend here in New York if you're around.
And can I shamefully plug my Twitter at Aries Spears, which I just did.
There you go. Back with more Aries Spears after this.
The Artie Lange Show, weeknights on Audience, only on DirecTV.